It's no surprise that Wilson was the next character on the checklist to receive an update, and people are giving quite a few mixed, mostly positive, reviews on him. So given all the conversations, I can't help but want to chime in on the subject, so here are my thoughts on the Wilson rework. First, I think it's important to establish where Wilson is in regards to how he sits amongst the cast. Wilson is Don't Starve's basic poster boy. He's basically the Mario of Don't Starve, in that he doesn't really have anything particularly special about him, aside from the fact that he isn't particularly special. Pre-rework, he didn't really have any perks aside from growing a beard. He's really meant to ease people into the Don't Starve experience, but as a result, not a lot of people play him. There are better alternatives for newer players like Wendy or Willow, even Wolfgang, which means that newer players don't really play him as much. He doesn't really have anything to set him apart for experienced players to pick him, because beard hair can be gathered through alternative means. So ultimately, him being the average character results in him being kind of bad in the grand scheme of things. So, what did they do in order to try to remedy all of this? Post-rework Wilson requires inspiration, which is capped at 15, so you won't be able to have every single one of these perks at once, but essentially he's gotten a skill tree. The different perks that he could have are split into different categories, so let's go through all the categories and, understand what they do. The torch. You can increase the duration on the torch, as well as increase the light radius that the torch gives off. With the final upgrade being able to throw your torch, which acts as a stationary lantern. The alchemy category allows you to turn 3 twigs to 1 log, and 1 log into 2 twigs. This splits into different branches, including the ores, which at its first upgrade allows you to turn 3 rocks to 1 flint, at its second allows you to turn 3 niter to 1 gold, and at its third upgrade allows you to turn 2 cut stone to 1 marble, and 1 marble into 1 moon rock. The gem option allows you, at the first stage, to turn 2 red gems to 1 blue gem, and vice versa, 1 blue gem and 1 red gem to a purple gem, without the need of a prestidigitator. And the second upgrade allows you to turn 3 purple gems into 1 orange gem, and 3 orange gems to 1 yellow gem. The third upgrade allows you to turn 3 yellow gems to 1 green gem, and 1 of each gem for 1 iridescent gem. This is currently the only way to do Celestial Champion without having to go into the ruins, so that's something that's neat. The third option is the Icky option. This allows you to turn 3 morsels to 1 meat, 1 meat to 2 morsels. The second stage allows you to turn 3 beefalo wool to 1 beard hair, and 3 beard hair into 3 beefalo wool. The third upgrade allows you to turn 6 rot to 1 manure, and 2 hound teeth to 1 bone shard. Wilson also has an additional tab called the beard category, which improves your beard growth, as well as increases the insulation that you get from the beard. At his final stage, it also allows you to store food inside of his beard, and I do think that this is probably one of the most useful tabs that he has access to, since this inherently just helps him survive and ignore portions of the game, such as just extra inventory needing to be taken up by food. The insulation from the beard can also help quite a bit. Overall, this isn't too bad of a tree. I definitely think I'm probably going to be rolling with this. The final category is the Nightmare Transmutation, which requires you to both unlock at least 12 different categories, and it requires you to kill the Ancient Fuel Weaver. This allows you to turn 1 Dreadstone into 2 Pure Horror, and 3 Pure Horror into 1 Dreadstone. You can also turn 3 Pure Horrors into 2 Nightmare Fuel, and currently all of these are only used for making armor, which functions as night armor, which isn't very exciting. I do like how they incentivize players to go kill Fuel Weaver, because it ultimately gives newer players a goal to strive for, rather than just surviving. As a side note, I do think it's important to mention the new content that they added, because this is also coming with the Wilson update. They added a new boss called the Daywalker. It requires a pickaxe to initiate the fight. Currently, Woody, Worley, and Wolfgang can break the pillars with regular pickaxes to initiate the fight. The boss isn't terribly difficult, but it's still not a boss that you can just rush into without armor or anything like that. It drops blueprints for armor and a helmet, which basically function as night armor. If you get the boss to smash the pillars with his overhead attack, the pillars will break and drop 2 new types of items. So, now that we know all of that, what does it really mean? I think for the character, the torch upgrades aren't really great. The increased durability is only 20% at its max level, and that's not too much. The light radius increases it to about double its normal radius, which is pretty good, and the throwable torch makes it function as a worse lantern, but overall, The torch upgrades aren't great when compared to simply having a lantern. However, when it comes to worlds with caves disabled, so worlds like public servers where the host can't handle caves for one reason or another, the torch upgrades can help a ton. The issue with the torch upgrades is inherently that lanterns are just better. So once you get a lantern, the torch upgrades become pretty irrelevant. The alchemy tab is also pretty interesting. The twigs to logs and vice versa isn't too useful since neither of the resources are particularly sparse. The ores are interesting because the rocks to flint gives an additional method of getting flint. That paired with something like rock fruit will effectively make flint farmable without the need of petrified trees. 3 niter to 1 gold makes niter even more useful early on, since you have another way of accessing gold. If you're like me who doesn't really use niter for anything, you'll really appreciate this one. 2 cutstone into 1 marble, and then that 1 marble into 1 moonrock is pretty bad. Like, I really don't like this one. I am a little bit biased in this regard because rocks are something that I, as a Winona main, value having a ton of. But that being said, rocks aren't inherently rare. But even then, marble is something that you could duplicate with marble shrubs, and moonrocks are something that you can get an infinite amount of if you have something like Bearger or the Forest Stalker run through the moon pedestal. The gems are definitely the most interesting of them. This is very useful overall. There's not much to say about early gems since this is just turning your red gems into blue gems and vice versa, which is pretty useful overall. The fact that you don't need a prestidigitator in order to make a purple gem is kind of whatever, because a lot of the things that you're going to need a purple gem for, you're going to need a prestidigitator or better to craft. So ultimately, I don't think that matters all too much. 3 purple gems to 1 orange gem and 3 orange gems to 1 yellow gem is pretty useful, if only because there aren't ways of farming these gems that isn't on a cooldown. Those methods being, you can only really get them consistently from Dragonfly and from clearing the ruins. So just having another option on how to get those is pretty useful. 3 yellow gems to 1 green gem is crazy good, since green gems are probably the best gems in the game, making things like deconstruction staffs and construction amulets, which can be used to duplicate sets of items. The last bit is the iridescent gem, which currently only has the 1.5 uses of Wicker's books and activating the archives, which I'm counting as half of a use because you could just set them and then remove them once you're done with them. It feels weird to say that they are used in activating archives. The cost is definitely questionable if you're trying to work your way up from an earlier gem. If you're starting at the beginning, that being at red gems, you'll need 243 red gems in order to get 1 green gem, which is crazy. In my opinion, that's something that should be changed, it being 2 for 1 later on, so something like 2 purple gems for 1 orange gem and onwards will help tremendously with justifying the cost, because it could get pretty ridiculous later on. The Icky tab is definitely something that I think is going to be useful throughout the game, if only because morsels to monster meat and vice versa can help a ton with freshness, since turning one into the other does restore all of the freshness. I'm uncertain whether or not this is intentional, but if it is intentional, then this could just be used in order to refresh all of your meat, which is pretty good. 2 separate units of meat can also matter quite a bit in the crockpot, making this a pretty useful recipe. Beefalo to beard hair is whatever. Beard hair isn't really used in too much, but having it easily be farmed by just shearing beefalo is pretty great. Hound teeth to bone shards would be one of my favorite recipes if bone shards actually had any uses outside of their niche use cases. You really don't use them for much other than things like buckets of poop for the glow caps and for the mush lights, but outside of that, they're not really useful for much. Use them for like 1 or 2 things a couple of times and then you forget about them. So that's a little bit unfortunate. The Shadow tab also currently is just not very useful. The Pure Horror and Shard isn't really used outside of making the armor, which the armor isn't particularly terrific either. I do think that they're probably going to do something with Pure Horror and the Shards later on, so this definitely feels like they're prepping for something, but it's a little unfortunate that they don't already have some uses. Overall, I would say that this rework gives Wilson a ton of new perks, albeit very small ones. The way that I would describe them is as like micro perks, which these micro perks can help new players ease into the Don't Starve experience and help them in their early game endeavors. With the torch helping out with the light for those who might be too afraid of going into the caves, the rock transmutation can also help early on since it could get players the minerals that they might need at any point in time. And the gem transmutations help more experienced players who would want to turn gems into other types. So Wilson also has a use for more experienced players now. The Icky skill tree, as I said before, is probably going to be useful just throughout the entirety of the game, since it seems like a very versatile thing to just have on deck. So overall, this really helped Wilson. The fact that people are actually talking about him and considering playing him at all is a huge step up from where the character used to be as just being the character that nobody plays because he is so simple. Now, that being said, do I think this character is particularly strong now? Honestly, I don't think so, which is fine. I think as far as this character goes, they're never really meant to be a very strong character. They're always kind of meant to be average. But recently, because so many characters got reworked and because a lot of them actually got buffed, it makes sense that they are moving the line of what constitutes as the baseline a bit higher. But that's basically all I really have to say. I think this rework was fine if you look at it from the lens of this character is meant to be average. If you want Wilson to be good, then like, this rework probably wasn't the greatest. If you want him to be bad for whatever reason, also probably not the greatest. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's really interesting what they chose to do with Wilson, because I wouldn't have expected them to go this route, honestly. I thought that they were probably just not going to touch Wilson, if I'm being honest. I thought they were going to take this opportunity to go back and rework a bunch of other characters and present that as quote-unquote the final rework. So it's really cool that they went back and like gave him all of these options. I do think that one of the downsides is that he doesn't have all of these immediately when he starts the game, which sounds like a really weird drawback to me. Because if you're a new player and you're playing as Wilson, then you're going to want all those options to begin with. But at the same time, it makes him feel a bit more rewarding if you play over time. But if you're a more experienced player and you just don't care about playing Wilson, then you could probably just go into a world and then skip a couple like 100 days and then get all the inspiration. But the fact that it also transfers over helps a ton too. At this point, I'm just rambling about what I think about the Wilson rework, so I'm gonna probably just end the video here. I think it's really interesting though. I think this Wilson update was really interesting. Let me know what you guys think, if you guys have any opinions on the Wilson rework, or how he stands amongst the other characters. But until next time, bye-bye.